All right, we're on Facebook. Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Ramera Abraham.
I am Taylor Pollock. Both of us were part of the first round of Spotify's EQL residents, and we are here with William Garrett and Jack Mason. Ramera, if you want to read William's bio.
For sure. So, William Garrett is a producer, mix engineer, and recording engineer based in New York City. He's been a freelance producer and engineer for over 40 years with his own studios in NYC and LA, both of which are now closed, but Electracraft East and West. And he also built and ran a studio for Sony ATV Publishing for 15 years. In 2016, William joined Spotify as chief engineer of their in house studio and was put in charge of audio production for the Spotify Singles program. Since its inception, the program has released nearly 600 songs and garnered more than 3.5 billion streams. He's now senior producer for recorded music at Spotify. Just a couple of the artists he's worked with over his career include Aerosmith, Carly Simon, Alicia Keys, and Nora.
Yes, and Jack is a Grammy-nominated recording engineer and mixer based in Brooklyn, New York. Trained by Brad Lay at MSR Studios, Jack now works at Spotify Studios out of Electric Lady Studios on all of their Spotify Singles recordings, as well as freelances for a wide variety of clients and project genres from hip-hop to Broadway. Previous clients include J. Cole, Queen Latifah, Tyga, and Sammy Adams. Nice.
Thanks so much, Taylor. So just to make sure we're jumping right to the meaty questions and making sure that we have ample time for questions from the audience, we're going to go and jump straight into some of the content that we've created for you guys today. So my first question for you is, what are Spotify Singles and how did they actually come to be?
So back in 2016, as you said, I was hired to be the chief engineer of the in-house studio. And one of the programs that was being started by a then producer employee, content producer named Brian Groen, was this idea to do Spotify Singles. Spotify Singles is an homage to an old 45. So it has an A side and a B side. The A side is, the artist's own song of the moment if they want to promote something from their latest record or something like that. And we work very closely with them to create a new version of that particular song. Obviously, having just a sort of live version of them doing it that's very similar to the original isn't really going to garner any excitement or any more streams. So we coach and work with them to really create a unique, interesting, and it's a great moment for them because they get to do the song, the way they might have done it in another way, or really try out some new genre that works. The B-side is a cover song, which is already unique to them, so we don't have to worry so much about the style in which they do it. And those choices are really made by the artist, and they're basically based on whether it's a song that means something special to them, like a reason they wanted to get into music, or this was part of their life, or it can be a strategic choice where you choose a cover song that's maybe a Post Malone song or a Taylor Swift song or something that will, when searched, will show up and people will be drawn to it. A lot of the times, the cover songs, Taylor Swift on occasion has posted about the Taylor Swift cover that a band has done. So, there's a sort of strategic idea. And as you said, we usually release every Wednesday. We started in 2016. I think we're at almost 600 songs. And now we're starting to align the singles projects with other playlists within the company and doing a lot of different recorded music in-house.
Amazing.
Are we going to watch this video real quick, I think?
So that was about 2 years ago. And when we crossed 1 billion streams, they did crowing about it. And so that was part of that. You could see some of the amazing artists that up to that point we've worked with, and now we've got 2 more years under our belt. So as you said, almost 2.5 billion around there somewhere. And yeah, it's really, really good that that many people are finding these things interesting.
Just to continue a bit on that point of pre-production, how involved do you get with the artist on this, and how far are they usually willing to change the original production of the song?
So what we do is I mean, luckily now the idea is kind of common, so they know coming in that this is what they're going to be asked to do in the beginning. It was maybe a bit of a harder sell, but they're very willing to do it. I think they see it as a really exciting exercise. I try to make it clear. A lot of people come in and they say, "Oh, sure, we'll just do an acoustic version of that song." And I try to stress that this is not unplugged. It's more of an opportunity to take it in a whole nother direction. So I'm always like, marching bands, string section, chorus groups, wild animals, everything's welcome in this opportunity to do something super cool. So that's my big pitch in the pre-production meeting. And usually we get, on the rare occasion, we get direct communication with the artist, but in general, it's with the artist team and their management, because part of the pre-production also that Jack is heavily involved in is the logistics, setups, all that kind of stuff. I do most of the talking about stuff, but sometimes I was lucky to work with Niall Horan in London, and they were super open to pre-production. So I actually went to a rehearsal the night before the session at AES Studios, and we basically completely rearranged the whole song. They were really generous at looking to me for direction. So he took one of his songs and slowed it way down and made a whole different thing. And I find that so interesting because it changes the whole impact the song has, especially lyrics. When it's at a different tempo and a different style, it really can create a whole new moment. So sometimes it goes that deep, and other times we're just talking through managers and record labels and not knowing until the day they come in exactly what they're going to do. But recording session gives us another opportunity to continue to stress that. They're saying, instead of using that guitar sound, try this.
Nice. Well, I'm just linking back to something else that you mentioned. You mentioned Air Studios in London and Niall Horan. I'm just seeing in some of the slides, I think just above here, we have some photos of some of the other studios that you guys work out of. I know that you mainly work out of Electric Lady, but do you have?
So in the history of singles, we started, the studio that I was hired to manage and work in was a John Stork built studio in the West 18th Street office. And it was, so we utilized it for this Spotify singles. And when I got there, we sort of beefed up. You can see a picture of it there on the one side of that screen. So that was where we started. Then they moved headquarters, and they moved it very quickly. So we didn't have a chance to build or figure out another studio. So this wonderful deal was made with Electric Lady that we're residents here. So as this slide shows, I have a mixed suite, which is the one with the Wurlitzer in it there, and Jack has that groovy room. And I just want you to know that he picked the fabric on the panels. So I just want to make that clear.
I was going to say the aesthetics are strong.
Yeah, no, they're totally strong.
Thank you.
He's vibed out the place big time.
Credit where credit is.
That's
I
right.
appreciate that way.
So, and then as you were mentioning with Air, so we're lucky enough that I think Jack put in the presentation a picture of he and I working down at Esplanade Studios in New Orleans. We did some great stuff down there with a bunch of jazz artists. And then we work out of Abbey Road and out of Air Studios in London. We work out of East West in LA. So we've really, and it's, it's just if the artists can't come to us, we'll go to them. And so we've been able to have these relationships with these amazing studios. For me, it's super exciting. Jack and I spent 4 days before the Grammys in January at East West Studio recording 4 different artists, including Brittany Howard and Emily King. And I can't remember. But anyway.
Yeah. Jesse Reyes.
Right. It's a great.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're very lucky to be able to work in some of the premier places in the world and to be based at our favorite studio in the world, Lady. love being here and being part of the history here. It's really, really great.
I think
I'm in Studio D now upstairs. So you don't think it's my amazingly tricked out home studio. But I wish I had this at home. But you can see, and this actually has outdoor space. And it's really groovy. There's some groovy keyboards over there, and it's quite the spot. So we're very, very, very lucky and blessed.
I think it also kind of like speaks to, there were certain advantages to our residency at the 18th Street studio, being within the Spotify office and being able to maintain a very consistent workflow and have a real intimate connection between the artist and Spotify as a brand. And I think as we had to move out of that facility, the consequential benefit is that William and I, both coming from big, large scale studio backgrounds, like it's our way of bridging the gap between the artist and the record making, and making sure that we're still honoring these large format, large scale recording studios, and making sure that they stay large scale and making records. I think that's really, really important to us, and so it's certainly an honor and a privilege to get to walk into Electric Lady every day and to get to walk into all this.
Yes, definitely. Just to get into it now, because we're all audio nerds here, we really want to hear how you start setting up your sessions, and like, can you just walk us through, well, first let's go through like what a typical day of recording looks like. So the artist shows up, or how about even before that, you've done the pre-production, now how do you set up for that?
Yeah, so I'll just say that, and Jack can handle the more technical end of it, but during the pre-production, we really go deep in terms of, Jack has created all these great sort of format things they fill out. Who's playing what? We send them a list of all the in-house gear we have. They make preliminary choices. So, if the bass player says, I want to play the 72 P bass through the 75 B15, we have it all set up. We have a little bass station all set up. So all that's done in communication with the artist team beforehand. So our goal is to really have it plug and play. Like they walk in, and Jack and the team here has got everything set up, everything line checked, everything done. And then we can easily make, if they say, oh, I don't like this guitar, how about that one? Because we have them all laid out. Just like, oh yeah, we have it. And and then Jack, any more comments you have on the actual technical? He's really created some great templates for us to use, because at one point we were doing 3 or 4 sessions a week, so this stuff had to just go really quick.
Yeah, it had to be very turnkey, and we'll get into that when we start talking about microphones and such. I want to say, I guess the other added thing that we always do is we basically take everything the artist has sent us of what they want, and then we'll basically say, let's add 15 or 20% more gear to the room. Just because that, whether it's that shock and wow factor, we want the artist to walk into a room and be like, I didn't even ask for that, but the Wurlitzer's ready to go, the Rhodes, there's vibes in Electric Lady that are mic'd up and good to go. Just like, we just want it to be as inspiring as possible. And if we can have an artist coming in with one idea of what they want to do and then be totally inspired to change that and do fresh that day of, that's a win for me. So that's why being as prepared as possible on the front end allows us so much more flexibility on the back end once the artist is there, because we don't have the luxury of locking out a studio for a month and making a record. We have to make 2 songs that live in perpetuity, that sound competitive and comparable to something that an artist may have spent a month on. So we are as prepared as possible going in, and the through line throughout this presentation will be our session with Vampire Weekend, which was our first session at Electric Lady Studios. We did, I believe, come close to maxing out the 64 I/O that room has to offer. So this is an example of what would happen as a result of those pre-production calls. I'd find out all of the different band members' names. You can actually see there's a tab on the bottom there that says layout. And that would be something that I make sure is printed out and is in front of William at the front of the console, ready to go. So we know every single band, like every player's name, exactly where they're located, especially if we need to talk back to them directly. So this will go to the assistant, and then back to the Vampire Weekend input list on the far left. this is what would get sent to the assistant. So it has the source, whatever it may be, all of our microphone choices, the patch, and the patch is entirely left up to the discretion of the assistant because it's a crazy patch bay on a Neve 8068 or 78 rather. The mic pre is all Neves in that room, and then there's sends, returns, inserts. In this case, the console is split, so you have 40 channels that could be mic inputs or line inputs or returns, and 32 discrete returns on the far right. So this is a way of me being able to be on Pro Tools and maybe doing some internal balancing there, but making sure that William's kind of front and center. And if he needs to kick up the drums a dB or ride a vocal or whatever it may be, he's in control of that over there. So all of those multi-track returns are actually just Pro Tools outputs, which eventually I'll pull up the Pro Tools session for this and I'll show you how that all works. But as it scrolls down, this just shows every single source. So this was 2 full drum kits in the room, plus percussion, 3 electric guitars, an acoustic guitar, lead vocals, background vocals, piano, keys, clavinet, a bunch of synths, Whirly, Mellotron. And Vampire Weekend is a large band, so all of this is happening simultaneously.
Wow.
So at the very and then we have some room mics there, just a pair of they have original 414s with the C12 capsules, so those were positioned in the center of the room. And then I always print a board mix if we're tracking live, always a good safety, always a good way to reference what we were listening to that day. And then as you scroll down, it also shows things like all of my Pro Tools session, the lead vocal effects, the background vocal effects, the verbs, etc., where those are supposed to be allocated on the faders. And then if you scroll down even more, there's probably headphone inputs. Yeah, there you go. So they have MyTech private cues. We have all of the different sources for each of the inputs, plus how they're being fed. So in this case, we were using, I like to use Pro Tools direct outputs as much as possible because it's a signal, it can't get messed up anywhere. And then any additional notes for the assistant engineer is there on the right if they can't fully intuit what I'm going for in this spreadsheet. Very, very, very yeah. And so this would then get sent to the assistant. And then we are fortunate enough that when we walk into Electric Lady the day of the session, all of this is basically ready to rock for us.
And I will say also that when we work at other studios, if Jack doesn't go with me, say to Abbey Road, what we do is we look at their mic list and all their gear list and stuff, and then we make our own. Jack and I work on that before I go, and we communicate. Jack communicates with their crew to make sure it's the same kind of setup. I think we're a bit unique in this being all set up when you walk in. I think regular studio stuff, people don't. So I've noticed at some other studios, they're like, yeah, we'll just do all that when you get here. And I'm like, no, we want it all done like the night before. So when everybody walks in, set up. And your question about what happens when the band gets there is we basically just walk them around, explain everything to them. And like, we try to have a lot of good gear out. It's kind of a wow factor. I think bands are really comforted when they know that at least it looks like we know what we're doing because the gear we've chosen and how we're set up and all that kind of stuff. So really there's a bit of a hosting thing at the top because, we've never met these. A lot of times we haven't met them face to face. I try to go, if they're playing in town at the same time, I try to go to their shows the night before and do a little, how you doing? So that the next day they're like, oh yeah, that's the guy from we met last night. So, but if that's not possible, it's the first time we're seeing everybody. So they've got to be super comfortable. So the sort of vibing, setting up the vibe, very, very important. Make sure everybody.
Like you're setting the stage for vulnerability in a matter of, like we were saying before, 8 hours most of the time to get 2 full recordings. So all of that is essential legwork in order to make sure that happens.
I guess with a band, going back to your example of Vampire Weekend, they are a big band, and it makes sense that everyone would want to be recording live. So one of the questions that we've got is, do you try to capture the room as much as possible in those situations? How much isolation is going on? I guess it depends artist to artist, but how do you deal with bleed, for example, in those situations?
Jack and basically, we for us, it's nice in pre-production to have some separation. We did a session one time with Arcade Fire, and they were very against isolation. So we had 27 people in the small studio at 18th Street at one time, all playing live. It included a 14 young woman choir, a string quartet, and a 9-piece band. Some people with headphones and some people with wedge monitors.
Wow, it's like a social distancing nightmare.
And I kept saying, yeah, and these days that would not happen. And Win and his brother are both like 6'8", so they're like, it was amazing. And I totally got what they were going for, but kept kind of nudging them, like, because we had the string quartet in our vocal booth, and I was like, can't we just close the door maybe to that, please? Or can we overdub? Do the whole thing live, and then let's overdub the strings quiet. Let's do one pass. They were like, nope, no overdubs.
I think we did eventually convince them to overdub vocals, but even that was only a SM7 in the control room, no headphones, everything through the monitors, and it's just like we're ready to go for that too. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to, like, if the artist is that confident in what they want, like, you go with the flow.
Well, and I've since gotten to know those guys, and that's the way they like to record. I've found
right
visiting them in New Orleans, but anyway, yeah, that was a crazy situation. But I think Jack will agree that for our post-production, we appreciate separation if the artist will go for it. And
totally.
and Jack can speak to this, but not everything's live. So sometimes we work with bands that want to do things piece by piece, build the band. Speak to that.
Right. So, I mean, there's a picture there, slide 16, I think, shows the benefit that we have at Electric Lady. They have these amazing amp ISO boxes that have a ventilation panel in the back. So you can put an Ampeg B18 in there, any guitar amps or whatever. And it's pretty amazing how wonderfully isolated we get. It is, that room is so inspiringly beautiful. If you go up to slide 12, it's just like, it has the most incredible original artwork. The second you walk in, you feel like the spiritual connection to the history of the records that were made there. But there's not a single isolation booth in the room. It's just one large live room. So they very strategically have this great sounding little dead drum corner in the back right, so you can see those large gobos. That's where our drums always live. There's a great center section there for acoustic guitar or a lead vocal if we're overdubbing. You can see in the far back by the mural, there are those ISO boxes. Key World to the right, and then slide 13 shows Ezra from Vampire Weekend in the vocal booth. So this is actually butted up against the control room window, and has a full, a ceiling window gobo. And then those two panes of glass look out into the entire live room. And William can support me here. Sightline. It's
Bingo.
Essential for us, right?
You got to see people, and they've got to be able to see each other. So we're always working great visual communication on top of cue systems as well.
Exactly. So we're always like, if it's live, then we do what we can, and we try to nudge the band to be as isolated as possible while still maintaining something live. And if we can convince the artist to overdub a dry vocal after the fact, so knowing that post-production is the thing we all have to do a lot of the time, doing it when you have cymbal bleed and a bunch of drums in your vocal mic, it makes it increasingly. So we do what we can, but it's never a no. I think that's a big thing, and that goes along to the production. Like, right, like if the artist wants to do it this way, then we do that. We do it the way that they're comfortable doing it, because it doesn't look good for us. It doesn't look good for Spotify. It doesn't look good for Electric Lady if we're the ones saying, no, you have to do it this way. That in that capacity, we're standing against creative influences, creative genius, whatever you want it to be.
I mean, it's a good point that we're in a different sort of, because the artist has not, or the label has not hired us to make this record. So how I produce and how we work with how they want the session to go is a light touch, because it's really their thing, and we're not telling them what to do. So again, like if Arcade Fire wants to do everything live, great. If somebody wants to do it inch by inch, bit by bit, great. That's how we do it. And Jack and I will look each other with a sigh of relief. When we were working with the Raconteurs, we did a live track, and then it was over, and it was like, okay, that's good. And then Jack's like, I'll just cut the vocal. And Jack and I are like, yes, because we'll have control over it in the final analysis. But we never would have said, go do that vocal again. So we have that.
Going on with mics though, could we just gotta, let's keep moving this on.
Sure.
What are your favorite go-to mics for when you're doing this? Like, I mean, I know it's different for every artist, but like, what are your like go-to setup things that you do?
I'll let Jack address that. When he came on board after I was there for 6 or 8 months, he already knew what my favorites were, so he incorporated those, and we've made lots of changes, and we love to experiment with as well. So Jack can.
Right. It goes two ways, right? We have the need to have sure things that we know will work no matter what, because we don't even want to risk the chance of not having the right sound for somebody. And then there are other elements here where it's like, come a certain point, the most exciting thing for me is to learn something new or try something new out. So then I know, like, okay, with this amp, this mic was absolutely rocking, but when I'm doing this high gain thing, it doesn't work at all. So these are just like a couple miking techniques that we use. A pair of DPAs in this kind of like inverted XY, which is the idea, I believe, being that the top mic is actually pointing down to the high 3 strings and the bottom mic is pointed up at the lower 3 strings. And then you record it as a stereo channel, pan them hard left and right, and you kind of get this beautiful stereo spread as if you're in the middle of this incredible pan across all 6 strings from low to high. This is something I'm sure that I saw watching like a YouTube video or something, or saw some other engineer doing. And I was like, oh, I'm going to try that out. And then I tried it out and I was like, this is amazing. And now I'm going to keep doing this until I see something else that I want to try out. As far as the electric guitar goes, Beyer M160 and an SM57, usually a dynamic and a ribbon mic are our go-tos. We've also had always a 57, but we'll throw in the 414 sometimes, or a U87 if we want something a little bit crispier. We really want detail in the high end, top end. Bass amp is usually a FET 47 or U47. This is a pair of C12s on a piano. The Electric Lady has an incredible SM69 FET, a Neumann mic. That's absolutely amazing on piano. And I do like miking piano with a stereo mic. Perfect for phase. I can get the exact, like, it's just flat out. I just know that it's going to work. But we've also done pairs of 57s, like it's I don't believe that there's a dogma in any of this. I just think that a lot of the time we also have to work against what's available at Electric Lady plus our own mic locker. So we do like to try stuff out.
I'll interject, Jack, is one of the things that since we were working so fast in the beginning, we had some vintage mics, but sometimes they proved unreliable. And also you don't have a minute. You don't have time to do kind of a microphone shootout with the vocalist. You basically just put up a mic and that's what they do. So when we were at 18th Street, we ended up using this beautiful SE mic that seemed to sort of fit on 99% of the vocalists. But now that we're Electric Lady, they have an unbelievably beautiful vintage U67. So we throw that up as our go-to because that uses. But in the beginning, we built a mic locker sort of based on reliability, and we're able to try a lot of amazing mics, and then start to accumulate some old ones like this screen now.
Yeah, the AKG D19E. It's a dynamic cardioid mic. I use it on snare drum pretty much. Yeah, I always start with this and then snare top, and I'll work away from it if need be. It's just it's fat. It's got a detailed top end. It somehow rejects the hi-hat perfectly. I don't know, but it just always works and it sounds amazing. So I move on. You know what I mean? I think picture 19 shows the drum setup at Esplanade. C12As as overheads if we can. If a studio has those, I will always use them. If not, we have a pair of Soyez 013s, not the tube version. We have the FET version. We tried both of them out. The FET version was just as good, if not better than the tube version for us. So I'm like, if I don't need to carry around a power supply, I'm not going to carry around a power supply. So we bought those little Soyez FET mics, and they've been our overheads, I think, since we bought them, right? Like we used to have SM81s, and even the RN17s are amazing there. Picture he probably shows horn setup at Esplanade. Ribbons, not reinventing the wheel here. It's R44s, RCA 44s, and Coles. The base picture below that shows, I think, the AEA 84. That was for his trombone, or no, not trombone, tuba.
Tuba.
And then we have a 57 and a C12 for the upright bass. And I honestly think the 57 won in this instance, and it's probably because he's playing live in the room with the drummer, right? So I couldn't get away as much with what was going on in the 12, but the 57 had all the rejection that I needed.
I feel like 57 usually win.
Yeah, they work. They work. There's a reason they're still around, right? They're the best.
And this was with the Preservation Hall Jazz Band session with them. Yeah, talk about Key World. That looks.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this is a perfect thing. Like they probably asked for the piano and the organ, and then we were like, set up every single keyboard you have, because I think PJ Morton was coming in, and then and because we set all of this stuff up on the record that PJ did with them, we had the keyboard players sitting back to back playing simultaneously, and PJ's cutting a vocal at the same time, and like that never would have happened if we didn't have all of those keyboards, right, ready to go, because it just takes too much time to set stuff up like that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else specific as far as microphones. I don't think that we do anything outrageous. I think that coming from my background at MSR, doing all these Broadway cast dates and stuff, we just pick mics that work, that we know will work, and it could be like technique wise. I think is now a good time. Should I pull up the Pro Tools session from Vampire Weekend?
Yeah.
Shows. So are you guys seeing the mix window or the edit window?
We are seeing.
I'm seeing. Yeah.
Cool. So this would be an instance where we didn't know what Ezra was going to be willing to do. So we had probably the 67, or no, we had the Rupert Neve tube, SE Rupert Neve Designs tube mic for his lead vocal in the booth. But we also had either a 58 or an SM7 ready to go at the same time, because obviously if we can get him into that little booth to cut live, then great. We're covered on isolation. We're covered on post-production on the back end. If we don't, we need to make sure we have a mic ready for him to sing. And I think as those sessions were even going on, William, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was the cover song or the original, they didn't fully have the arrangement down. So they were going back and forth between the piano, and we were grabbing mics from all over to make sure that we were covered in case he was like, okay, I'm ready to go. And I'm doing a piano vocal, right?
That was they slowed their original song way down and want to do it in sort of a Bruce Hornsby-esque way. So we talked about, I can't remember if it was a Juno 106 or an one.
We're finding the patch.
We were like, do they have one? And then one of the assistants appeared with the vintage keyboard, and then the bass player looks up what patch Hornsby had used for a song. He says, "Oh, that's 106. Put it on patch 106." So we were like having fun trying to figure out how to get.
Yeah, so this shows kind of how I approach tracking in that room on a session this big. It's very helpful because William and I are both there, so William can really control the monitor section. So if we're getting sounds, I'll have all my I'll be building a little rough drum mix here, and then all of my headphone sends go direct out to drum 1 on the cue box. And after I've got a sound going, I think I do Option Command H, copies my faders that I've got here to my headphones, and I'll do volume and pan, and I hit OK, and you can see how all of my headphones are now exactly what the drum mix that I'm listening to in the control room are now feeding our lovely drummer out there. And then I can always, it's all pre-fader, I can always adjust things along the way if they need more kick or snare or whatever. But that's kind of my trick of how I go through all of the different, we're getting sounds. We have like little basic.
And just so they know, Jack, when we're getting sounds, it's not like whack the snare. A lot of times it's not whack the snare. It's like the band just starts playing. And so
Right.
we've got to sort of tighten everything up and put together an amazing headphone and in control room mix as it sort of goes on the fly, just so if they say, okay, you guys ready to record, which sometimes they do within 10 minutes.
Exactly. And then I use the Plugin Alliance Brainwork stuff just as an AAX DSP plugin across the board. It's just in case we need to do some EQing, have compression that we're not willing to print at any given. And it's only X amount of samples in delay. It's totally unintelligible to the artist, so it's super helpful for us just to be able to make those changes, to do something on the fly, but we're a little willy-nilly on whether we're supposed to. And then with a session like this, all of the reverbs I have are dedicated to the source. So if the drummer wants reverb in his headphones, if the vocalist wants reverb, slap, delay, or whatever, it's all fed to the same returns for William and the same headphone send. And then I'll also have additional reverbs that don't go to the headphones. So if William's like, I want more reverb on that vocal, but the vocalist in the booth doesn't want any more reverb, I have something that I can put and send into the control room, but is not going to affect his monitor. And same thing goes for the music. And I also have 4 additional miscellaneous verbs always ready to go. So if the guitar player is like, I want reverb in my headphones, but I don't want to send the whole full band's verb to the headphones, I can just pop it in. And then I can always monitor all the levels of the different headphones over here on these master faders, which are just the outputs that would be.
All looks
So that's
good.
That's a tracking session. No. It's all good.
No, I was just going to say, you're kind of segueing perfectly into kind of my question about your mixing process. And, we're already having a preview of one of your Pro Tools sessions. And you're already kind of talking about the plugins that you're using and kind of go-tos for that. But
so the way the process, so once we finish the session, as you can tell by now, Jack is extraordinarily organized. And so it goes into Jack world. And, from the time we started working together, he knows what I like and, what kind of plugins I want mix wise and how to lay out. So we have a template, the mix. So he sets up and he adds, drum samples if we need them. He adds all kinds of stuff. He'll clean up vocals. Since we're doing stuff really quick, a lot of time there's a cleanup duty with isotope and mouth clicks and all kinds of and all that. And he educates me by sneaking in plugins that I've never heard of that he's seen somewhere. And I usually respond, Jack, what is this thing on here and he tells me why I should use it. And that, what'd you say? 60% of the time I go along.
Yeah, I think I have a good return rate on my investment in new plugins.
So I've learned a ton in that part of the process from my process being shifted. And then we mix and then send it out. And the artists and the artist team have final calls. So we'll do how many revisions to get it so they love it. But we have a very, very strong first or second pass approval rate. It's an honor that people dig the mix. Jack can speak to some more of the technical.
So once
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah, go for it.
I was just gonna say, so you get the mix, and then I know that you were showing us also a lot of your outboard gear setup too. So how do you mix with your plugins and to your outboard gear?
Totally.
Jack, because it's really cool the way we have.
Yeah, so we it's the best of both worlds. So once the session's with me, I do it like William was saying. I always have everybody can see this mix. Yeah.
Yep.
Killer. So I have all of these drum triggers that are ready to go. Some samples that I've made, some samples that are from Slate Trigger, some samples that I've just gotten from Splice or whatever it may be. I always have my toms ready to go with an EQ and our bass to do the resonant frequency. All of the samples are always tuned to the drum that I recorded that day. I know some people are a little use it on the opposite way where it's like I'm trying to make up for stuff that's not there. But for me, I think I run into less phasing issues when everything's exactly what it should be. And then we kind of approach mixing from a top down a top-down way. So we have all of these different effects returns in every single mix session that'll get imported into the track. So I'll edit the tracking session. That'll be good to go. And then I do an import session data from our mixing template, and that includes all of our buses, all of our effects, and our master fader. So all of our effects feed an all effects bus. And then depending on what the kind of session is, I have an EQ if I need to pull anything out, remove some of the mud, and then a widening if I want to put the effects inside. Master fader is a mix between hardware inserts, and plugins. So we always print through a pair of the line inputs on a pair of Neve 1080. This is like a plugin version of what we would be doing. Basically just this section. The line level pre, no EQ, nothing. Just for a little color. We have the glorious undertone audio on Fairchild. This is UAD's Fairchild version. The undertone on Fairchild, I cannot say enough amazing things about. Control the threshold on the front. Has variable attack and release times. It is a blessing. It's a godsend. And so we have the attack and release set to kind of approach it like, okay, I'm just trimming peaks for the first second. Multiple stages of. Then it hits tape emulator, slate. See, yep, virtual tape. I have multiband compression if needed. I have a hardware Cush Clariphonic, which is this. I will say that these settings here are what our hardware does, but I would never do this in the plugin. The plugin isn't exactly like the hardware. It's a really cool parallel EQ that it's not altering any of the stuff that's coming. It's just blending high-end EQ along with the original source signal according to different EQ curves that are preset by these buttons here on the knobs. Then we have the Brainwork digital EQ, and this is mid-side EQ that I mostly use for this glorious little mono maker here, so I can sign up all the low end. It's also an additional gain stage as needed into our hardware Neve 33609. So William has this incredible 33609 from, I think he bought off of Dream Hire. Shout out Chris Dunn. Yeah. And right. And then, so this is kind of our last stage of compression along the way. And all of the hardware that we're using is done as hardware in so Pro Tools outputs in our patch bay feed the inputs of our hardware, and the outputs of our hardware feed the inputs of our Pro Tools. And that way, at any given point, I can just pop into an aux or my master fader, and under I/O, if I was in the mix suite at Electric Lady, it would have all of our labeled hardware exactly where it wants to be. And we'll show some pictures of that in a bit. We use Ozone as our limiter. And so all of this stuff is on from the second I have done finished editing, and I'm just doing a preliminary balance for William. Then all of our instrument buses feed that map. So I always have a drum bus, a stereo bass synth bus, a mono bass bus, 2 electric guitar buses, an acoustic bus, piano, keys, background vocals, lead vocals. And all of these plugins are kind of set to be gain staged into as needed. We have, de-essing. We are a big fan of the Eosis de-esser. I just got the FabFilter de-esser for the first time, so I'm all about this right now. Look ahead, incredible. 1176 for really treating the preliminary peaks, super fast attack. And then our compressor we'll use kind of as like opto mode, a little bit of glue on the back end. Multiband compressor, Soothe 2. If there's ever been cheating in what we do, Soothe. This is it.
Love Soothe.
J37 and EQ. So these are all of the buses that get brought into our tracking session once I finish editing. And then along the way, I'll build the balance and reallocate all of the outputs to these buses and move yours until I'm super happy. But all of the plugins are kind of set so that I know exactly where, if my snare drum is this loud hitting this, then I know my master fader is rock exactly where it should. And then after it's done in my room, I bring it into William's room. get all of the hardware inserts exactly where they should be, make sure we're gain stage, and William takes it.
And then once I get it where I want it, Jack always comes in and does another gauge changing on the master fader to make sure we're at optimum levels on all the hardware insert. Because I'm just I'm keeping an eye on it, and he does a little more stuff with works, tightens it up, and then we send it off to mastering.
Exactly. And there's another added benefit to this process, which is that I can, if an artist ever comes in and requests stems, I can highlight these auxes, highlight the song, hit bounce, and all of my stems are being in time. I don't have to go one by one. I don't have to do anything crazy. If there are some sessions, like I think Celine Dion is a perfect example, where the vocal had to be so on top of the music, more so than any artist I think we've worked with. I really we needed to separate the vocals and the music, because the vocal was triggering the bus compression so heavily that the music was just pumping against the vocal. So I also always have these hidden in the mix template. And this will just be an all music and an all vocal fader. And I'll just reallocate my outputs to exactly those buses. And then that way I can treat the vocal and the music independently. So I can take the Fairchild and put it on the vocal bus, and I can take the 33609 and put it on the music bus. And that way the vocal isn't triggering the music or vice versa. Yeah, and that's our mix.
Wow. Jack, this is a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's extraordinarily overwhelming, and I'm sure that I move fast. And I think we can certainly say it at the end, but William and I are very approachable, and we can put our contact info and whatever, and people are more than welcome to reach out for any additional stuff or just to chat.
Exactly. Yes.
Amazing. Well,
it's very deep. All this stuff has been extremely well thought out. That's what's so fun about it. We've had an opportunity to do the same type of stuff for a couple of years now, and it's really great to have such an organized. A lot of that I attribute to Jack, because I'm floating in creative world and saying, why doesn't this sound like this? And he does explain to you, which helps me a ton. So I think it's great that we get to have these templates to lay over, and then we can adjust.
There are some photos, I think, in that spreadsheet that kind of show or not the spreadsheet, I'm sorry, in the Google Slides that show all that hardware. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. So this is all in the mix suite. Everything's routed to our patch bay. The next slide shows.
We forgot to talk about the Premiere Reverb and the Space.
Yeah, the Premiere and the Space Echo.
My favorites. Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly remind everyone that is still with us that if you have any questions, as Jack and William are still going on, please drop them in the Facebook chat, and we will pull them up as we go. Continue. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I don't think that there's much more. I think I covered a lot of that stuff in the mix template, but the patch bay is there to William's happiness. I'm sure there's not a single patch cord that's probably used most of the time, because
it's clear that I prefer no patching.
Right. And so it's all normal, so that all of that gear is there, and even the Neves are set up so that if you plug an XLR into our little producer panel in that room, just the line output hits Pro Tools input. So you can just set your Pro Tools input to whatever it is. And it's just a nice way of having the workflow as if, we're all kind of accustomed to this interface workflow where everything you plug into the interface and it hits Pro Tools. This is a way of incorporating all of this outboard gear with almost a very little need to recall. And on top of that, very little need to recall a patch bay. It's all just.
Well, I think building off of that, one of the last questions we had was, how quick is the turnaround time for you? Obviously, this is a huge chunk this is a big undertaking, the mixing process. So, oftentimes, I guess we just want to know how quick is your turnaround? Does it vary? Do you often find yourselves going back in to record any bits? What's the kind of freedom / time constraint on that?
It does vary, but in general, we were sort of the peak of our output. I always felt like I had about a day and a half to 2 days. Now, when we're not behind the 8 ball on a whole bunch of things lining up in our queue, I can take a week off and on and work on them a little bit one and work on another day. Um, we have sometimes, if within the allotted time we don't finish something, an artist might cut a part later down the road, send us a stem, we'll fly it in. We've only had one or two situations where the artist was, well, maybe even just one, and they were just artistically on their side not happy with a cover choice and came back in and flipped the cover like it's actually in that particular case. I won't say who it is, so you don't came back. But it turned out to be like 10 times more amazing because the original cover was sort of like the original, and this became this beautiful, spacey, gorgeous thing. So yeah, the time really varies. We, like I said, we have a very good rate of artist approval for stuff. So every now and then you'll get stuck in a downward spiral of a DB here and a DB there, and we try to get it just right because our main goal is for everybody to be happy. But sometimes it's a matter of days, sometimes it's a matter of weeks. I'm a procrastinator, so I doodle until the bitter end, and then stay up all night cramming for
And
the
I'm not, and I have panic attacks.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
all good.
All good.
We
Exactly.
find a balance.
Exactly.
Do you ever find that when your artist comes in, they want their own engineer, or do you have some artists that come in already with their own engineer? Do you have
Yeah,
to?
we make that clear in the pre-production calls. If there's somebody they like to work with, we're all good with that. So sometimes we'll communicate with them, and a lot of times it might be somebody they trust in the band. Let's say a big band's on tour, their front of house guy may be their most trusted audio person on their team. So I'll liaison with that person and just make sure that we're on the same page. And I'm happy to step aside from the rig and just say, you do it. We had a great session with Migos, and their engineer DJ Jarrell came in, and they had a language and a rhythm that what they did in 6 hours would have taken Jack and I 4 days, because they had this groove together, and we just sort of sat and watched in awe. And I was happy to get to mix this, but he did the actual recording session. And it was great because the artists were super comfortable, were familiar with. On the mix end, some artists will say we want our team to mix it, and that's also fun. It's more fun if it stays in house, obviously, but we want to again make sure that they're happy, excited by the fun. And sometimes, again, I'll work in tandem with the person.
So this one's kind of a double question. Each of you might have a different answer, I guess. What is the most memorable session you've done for Spotify Sync?
People always ask me that question. I'm sure they always ask Jack that. It's hard to set sort of
I hope it's not
one or
political.
two. Well, no, it's not even that. It's just that the biggest thing my biggest takeaway is that, some artists might be coming in that you don't like, or, that it's not your kind of music. And you're like, oh, great, we get to work with this. It's not really my thing. And then they come in and they're so they're so professional, so nice, and they're so really good at what they do that by the end of the day, you have so much respect for their process that it's really enlightened me to never sort of prejudge any kind of situation. So mostly it's just fun stuff. I mean, when you get to do a session with Celine Dion or with Sting or with Yo-Yo Ma, I mean, that just in itself is like totally mind blowing. And then when they're super goofy and, amazingly fun to hang out with, that makes it even better. We did a session with Wilco, and we set up for the session the night before. Then they send their crew in, and the crew was like, nope, Jeff's going to want to stand over here by the drums. We're like, by the drums? We can't have that, And he's going to, so we moved everything around. Then the band walked in. They recorded their original and their cover. They recorded each song twice, and the session lasted 20 minutes. And Tweety at the end said, well, we could do that better, but we won't. And that was it. And so you have that on one extreme, and other sessions that have lasted for 15 hours where nobody wants, and we're having a ball. And
which is also great.
Which
like we're like William and I think it's like we might be a little bit different than a lot of people within the company, is that like we're like, let's go, like we're we're there to work and we're there to have a really good time with artists. Like,
You
we
are
absolutely live for that, right?
I'm
And
sorry,
that shows
Mr.
us.
Jamal, we don't have enough time to finish your cello, piece.
Right, exactly. It's
No.
like, why would you stand in the way of that? And there's just that just shows us how willing and wanting people want to be there. People want to be making music, and then consequently, it shows that we've earned their trust. So it's extremely validating to us to be sitting in a room and an artist being like, "Oh, I actually want to do this." Or in some instances, artists have been like, "Hey, I know that it's not for Spotify, but I have this other song that I've been really wanting to lay down, or I need to get a demo out, or I want to have another option." And we're like, "Great, of course, right?" Like we want,
and sometimes those songs come out like the Now Horn
right.
song I talked about.
Now Horn.
They wanted to have two options for the A side. We recorded, and they chose one, and then like 6 months later, they were like, "Can we release the other, please?" Really great. So we, but yeah, I mean, the Wilco situation was amazing. I'm trying to think, working with Celine was amazing. There's just so many people, and I find it interesting for me, working with bands I've never heard of, or maybe in a different world. Like, wow, this is cool. So it's just, I mean, if you look down the list, it's easy to say, oh yeah, that session was.
Yeah.
Recording John
Right,
Beck
right.
and Wynton Marsalis together. Yeah, that was pretty cool. And so it's hard to pick one. I guess that's the long answer to.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Okay, yeah, that's
Jack
didn't know.
may remember more than me.
No, I mean, I was watching that little video of the billion streams, being like, "Oh, I forgot about. Oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah, that one."
So we also forget about
it's a blessing. It's really incredible. We're incredibly fortunate to be able to do that, to work across so many different genres. It's a really exciting thing as an engineer, as a young producer, and getting to be in the room with William and other artists that bring in their own producers. It's just like getting you're getting paid to learn every day from your own choices and from choices that other people are making. So I don't think that William and I both consider ourselves two of the most fortunate people in this. We're incredibly lucky.
And it's very nerve-wracking, but the stress is great, because in the end of it, you have these really fast-paced, amazing days, like the Live at Electric Lady thing on tours was like 10 hours of just going. We were like, it was amazing. And when you finish, it's very exciting to have had that.
I'm incredibly jealous of both of you, but it's good that we're here to learn all the tips and tricks.
I guess we'll need some protection now, Jack, as people might.
We've got a question from the Facebook chat. One of them is, how early do you guys start recording things for the holiday playlist?
I was just in a meeting this morning about that. We actually give the artist the option if they'd like to do it. And the first year we did it, I was actually mixing some holiday stuff in August, about this time of year, and massive heats. So yeah, we sort of do it randomly throughout. This year, we've got some already recorded. Jack recorded a great one, dashboard, right? And but we'll start doing more this fall. We were just discussing this morning. We decided the 12 days of Christmas, the 12th months, we should do 12 songs.
We have another question as well. This one is, I guess, take it how you want. What sort of challenges / obstacles have you encountered while on these sessions?
I mean, for me, creatively, it's challenges are gently trying to nudge people toward a creative direction that I feel as a producer they should take. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we're in this thing where, we can't tell people what to do. So, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to be that kind of atmosphere. So sometimes you really would like them to do something the other way. And although we did finally close the booth doors on. But, and Jack, I think, can speak to technical challenges as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's like the thing that usually gives me the most anxiety is not having all of the information before a session. And so, the artist teams are on artist time. So there are some instances where people are willing to do pre-production and get me all of that tech info I need weeks and weeks before, and we're super well prepared. And then there are other times I'm texting with an Electric Lady assistant at midnight the night before, and I'm like, I'm sorry, dude, like I don't have any information, but this is what you should plan to set up. But don't come at me or William when I text you at 7 a.m. and I'm like, it's all acoustic. Scratch everything. We need them in a circle. Flip the room 90 degrees. Hang the mics upside. Like it just we don't really know. So
that's sort of normally part of the process.
Of course.
That's where we apply the Zen theories, right, Jack?
100%. 100%. It's totally it's a me problem.
If they ask me to change something, we're just gonna say, yep.
Yeah, it's no worries. And most of the time, the assistants already. Electric Lady is such an incredible facility and has such an incredible staff and such an incredible man. When we think we're about to ask for something, most of the time it's there. Yeah. It's just ready to go. The assistants know exactly how to read a room, what's coming. You ask for something once, it becomes part of their habit for every single session. It's really, really, really a stand-up place, and so we can be lucky.
You just have to think. I need a pencil and a pad, and
yeah, it's like
okay.
Amazing. Well, I think that is all the time that we have for this evening. But thank you guys, both of you, William and Jack, so much for giving us all of this insight and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you guys. And Jack's on vacation too. It's a double thing.
Oh, triple thank you,
Thank
Jack.
you. Yeah.
This is like a vacation from vacation. I'm here with my family. I thank you guys so much for this hour and a half.
Just talking about everything that you want to talk about all the time.
Yeah. Like happy place here, guys. This is my happy place. That's right. It's really, really awesome. Thank you guys so much. And like I said, I'm sure we'll share our contact info with AES. They can post that and reach out to us with anything. We're an open book.
Great. Thank you so much to AES as well for putting this together. They host some great events. So everyone that's still with us on Facebook Live, keep updated on their Facebook page for more things that are coming.
All right.
Cool. Yeah, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.